Okay, thanks everybody for showing up here. And they're doing their intro right now. You're going to get to see all the behind the scenes stuff. So just bear with us.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever it may be, wherever you may be, whatever it is, wherever you may be. How's that go? I got my tongue wrapped around my eye teeth. I couldn't see what I was saying. Y'all, please forgive me. I've been out Christmas shopping, and we know what that does to people. It just kind of turns your brain to mush. So,
yes. Yes.
but
Speaking of mush, unfortunately, Bigfoot Michigan Rob is running guns to Alaska via a dog sled. So hopefully, he gets his run done properly and back to us safely. But until then, you're stuck with me.
yes. As many of you can tell, this is not Bigfoot Michigan Rob.
Much better looking.
This is the one and only, the sexiest co-host on the planet, Jason McLean.
Absolutely happy to be here on this wonderful brunch. The Christmas edition of Brunch with Bigfoot.
Yes. I toyed with doing a Christmas show, but you know what?
That would require too much planning and forethought on our part.
Well, I was going to go with, we wanted to let everybody spend time with their family as well as us, so
yeah, that's mostly the first thing. Yeah. I mean, that's the more honest answer here.
But we have a very interesting show today. Robert Kryder.
We do.
A writer, the KX Kryder Exploration, and the link to his channel is in the description. And we're going to touch on something a little different today. I know it's near and dear to Jason's heart. Yes. So this is kind of a Christmas present for Jason. How's that?
Aww. And on the 10th day of Christmas, Mr. Tex gave to me a paleontology show. Let's go. Bring up Robert.
All right, let's get him up here and get this show on the road. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Robert Kryder himself.
How you guys doing?
So far, so good. Yes. I mean, we know there's another Robert Kryder out there, but we are completely dismissing him for what he did at the Christmas party last year.
Oh, great. Yeah, that wasn't me. That was the other guy.
Yeah, which is why you're the only one in our heart.
All right.
So there was an evil Kryder, and I killed him.
Oh, shit. Well, that proves he wasn't me then, though.
So tell us, Robert, a little bit about your channel. So the good people here, when they hop on, what are they going to find?
Well, basically, it's a short list of a lot of the exploration work we do, and a little bit of history and stuff on interviews, presentations to academia, and others, and basically just kind of a hodgepodge of some of the exploration stuff. There's unfortunately not as much on there as we'd like. We have a massive amount of information that we are rolling out and dumping as time goes on. We've been battling the algorithms and things, trying to get the word out.
Right.
And so what you see there is going to be straight from us. Usually it's a result of our own research and field work. Of course, we all glean things from others, but what you'll see is generally, authentic and original from us and ourselves only.
So do you focus in just one area, or are you sort of going to different locations? What kind of locales are we looking at here?
Well, yeah, everything from the Canadian border on the West Coast, and like recently we did the Michigan stuff, we did the conference, and then we did a week in the Upper Peninsula, and then all the way down to Texas and over to California. So basically the western 2/3 of the United States. There's a lot of ground in there, of course, we haven't covered, but we've been across that entire region doing the work. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of ground in the area that you're talking about. Um, so, out of curiosity, before we get too deep and heavy into things, what is there perhaps something you prefer to excavate for? Like, are you a big fan of aquatics, or are you looking for dinosaurians, or what are we looking here? Land based things, or do you have a preference at all?
Not really too much preference, and we like the unusual. So the odd, the unusual, the one of a kind.
Mhm.
Generally tend to go after things that were heard of or legendary or whatever, and then we go seek them out and solve whatever pieces of the puzzle need solved, and do the excavation. And that goes for paleontological stuff as well as mineral specimens or ore bodies,
Mm.
stuff like that. So we've relocated a lot of ancient Spanish mines, ancient Native American mines, stuff that predates the historical record and whatnot, and done
Oh,
recovery of
wonderful.
odd minerals, like one of the metals mentioned in Greek mythology called silver net. And
Yeah.
Sir Isaac Newton actually remade that metal. He was one of the only people until an industrial laboratory in the 80s reproduced it again. And he did it through the alchemical sciences or whatever, and
Hmm.
redid it. And it's quite the process. It's basically, you'd think it was impossible for anyone without an industrial furnace. And we actually tracked down and found the only known natural source for that on the planet so
Really?
far. Yeah,
Wow.
Okay. Interesting.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is fascinating.
Where
And trust
where
me, it doesn't
where
get
where did
weirder than
you
this channel. So you're in good company.
can you give us a vague location of where you found it?
Yeah, just east of central New Mexico, basically. So south of
Wow.
Santa Fe. There's a large volcanic blowout there that it's actually a pretty damn big volcano. The caldera is
Mhm.
probably a mile across, but it's
Oh,
basically
wow.
it's an unknown system. People don't talk about it much. And the some of the earliest mines in North America, the oldest silver mine in North America, is there. And Spain rolled in there and took it over, and it was their little private area 51 for a couple of 100 years. So it didn't make the historical record basically, but it's where a lot of the coolest stuff they were trying to pull off was done there. So,
Really?
yeah, and it's
I
I guess
did not know that.
it's got
That's
about an
interesting.
8,000-year-old mining history known for turquoise and silver, so by the natives.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's wow. Okay, so let's go back to the silver net thing. So, are you saying that it was actually okay for I'm going to try and simplify this
Hmm.
for viewers who may not be as geologically aware. Metals are formed during very long processes, but sorry, are you suggesting this is just naturally occurring, or is it a like it just is a normal form of geological process, or did the volcano somehow alloy this
Well,
thing
it,
this thing together accidentally?
yeah, it's alloyed together, but this particular volcanic eruption also created a lot of what they call polypseudomorphs, and that's where the atomic identification of a material changes, even though its look, crystalline makeup, and things like that won't. And so, in other words,
Mhm.
you can end up with what looks like granite in every way, and it be turquoise. So it can actually
Right.
change from its base to something else. So it goes from silica to basically aluminum oxide or anhydrous aluminum.
Really?
Yeah, so it can completely change its atomic identification and still look like the earlier. And what you'll see is, I think it happens with extreme, really, truly extreme plasmatic energy releases, and
Mhm.
because you'll see where a whole ore body is pushed over next to itself. And so you'll see the ore body or you'll see the mineral body, and then it won't test as that mineral anymore. It'll be next to itself into something else that doesn't look like what it is. So you understand it's like
Yeah.
atomically changing your literal makeup. Like you're beaming up Scotty, and instead of
Yeah.
getting Scotty, you get Spock. And now Spock's in Scotty. So it's kind of like this thing. So polypseudomorphism is one of the oddest things out there.
That's fascinating.
It happened at that location, but it is an alloy created by the way the materials were locked up in the ore body. So, like when Sir Isaac Newton made it, he had to use it's an alloy of copper and iron. And anyone that's associated with metals will understand this, and those that don't, I'll let you know. So you can weld steel or pour liquid steel on a copper
Mhm.
plate, let's say, and it will never stick to the copper. So they're dissimilar metals. They won't go together. They hate each other.
Right.
So this is actually an alloy of iron and copper. And so to get these things to alloys, what you would consider virtually impossible. But what happened in nature and what they found and replicated in the early metallurgy and the alchemy was that it would happen if it's encased in manganese. So if it's completely shelled in manganese and then put under high temperature and high pressure both, then those two metals will join together and congeal. And then you end up with a purple alloy that has some of the strangest properties there are, because you're looking at something that's non-magnetic, basically a magnetic shield, and of course it won't oxidize in the same mannerism as iron does. Right. It still oxidizes, but it's not the same thing. And so you end up with these two metals with completely different properties locked into one metal. And so it goes, wow. It changes everything. So it's not just the two combined. It basically gives an entirely new third aspect to those metals. So, and what all it can be used for, I have no idea. Yeah, and what all it can be used for, I have no idea. It came in Greek mythology. It was used to, I don't remember the two god or goddesses. It was used to chain up two powerful entities, and that Silvernet was chosen for the chain. And so, and it's mentioned other times as well. So I would assume it has some real special uses that just didn't make it down through the historical context. So,
well, I mean, a non-ferrous iron product, I can imagine a lot of uses for that. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. Is it's really shouldn't be possible, but yeah. So we found the natural source, and we don't know if potentially, since these mines and this mining in this area go back at least 8,000 years, and there is some evidence they go back as old as 10, and so, but we could almost imagine that this was the true source for the material that they then replicated in the early years of the alchemist sciences through, like 5,000 years ago, so and up. And so, we can imagine that, wow, this is probably the original natural source, since there's never been another source found yet. So,
right. Okay, hold on. I need to ask a little bit of clarification on what you just said there, because I'm fascinated now, even more so. Are you suggesting that the Greeks came to the U.S., mined the Silvernet?
Yeah,
that's where it's coming from.
It kind of goes beyond that. So this wasn't necessarily a hidden continent, and they knew the world was a globe, and they knew where everything pretty well was thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And
absolutely. So we know from float copper that was wrecked with the Antikythera device that they were mining copper for the quote unquote Bronze Age from here, from the U.S.
Right.
From the Great Lakes region. So
yeah,
I'm right there with you. I mean, we can't find, the bigger problem is we can't find anyone who didn't show up here.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it wasn't just that they were coming over on exploratory; they had a huge industrial presence. But it really wasn't anybody's benefit to go back to the what you call the old world, and to go shouting to everyone, "Here's where we get our resources," because there was world trade then, and they know at least two different cultures had full world fleets that traveled all the oceans of the earth. And with a 3 to 5 year turnaround time. The Celts were one of them, and we hear about that when Rome and the Caesar, Rome in 55 BC, burnt the Celtic fleet. He talks about that the height to the deck was taller off the water than his longest boat was long. And so you're talking boats with over 200 foot to the deck off the water. And that they mention as well, they never usually pull them in out of the ocean because they're so big. And so, but the Celts pulled them in to blockade the Roman Navy, who was then assaulting everybody in the area in the Med. And Rome ended up developing what they called high-speed winches and catapults to cut the rigging and sails on the big boats and then burned them where they set. So you can read all about that, but no one really goes there, because what does that mean? It means that they had a worldwide ocean-going fleet with boats with 200 foot to the deck, and we can assume by just standard boat proportion, that's at least an 800 foot long boat. And so you're looking at these world trade ships that would cruise all over. So what were they hauling on boats that size? These are boats that would carry, 1,000 ton, and so, or more. And then we look at the historical record. Of course, you mentioned where the copper was coming from the Great Lakes region, and then where was the tin coming from equal to make that bronze, and that was South America.
Right.
And when we look at the name Titicaca, that name actually means tin mine in Babylonian, not in the native tongue from South America. And so Titi is tin, Caca is mine in Babylonian. So you have tin mine, Titicaca. Yeah, so it's just deliberate. And then on the island in Lake Titicaca,
I'm gonna completely eschew the joke I should be making right now.
Oh yeah, I know.
Just because I am blown away by that. That is so.
And
Wow.
Babylonian idols or Babylonian gods featured on the handles of knives were also found
Yeah.
on the island there in Lake Titicaca. So you have the Babylonian presence, the art form and ideology, and then they don't know where the tin that fueled the Bronze Age really came from, and there is no known source large enough save those mines around Lake Titicaca. So
Yeah, I've long believed that the again the different there's never really a true Iron and Bronze Age, because we do find iron artifacts all throughout the quote unquote Bronze Age.
right,
It was just easier to work with bronze than it is with steel or iron.
yeah,
And so really I've always believed that what happened was we got essentially the old world got cut off from these new world sources for
hmm
whatever reason,
hmm
and then boom, now it's like, well, we don't have the same degree of copper and tin, so let's move over to a more abundant resource,
right,
even though it's harder to use,
yeah,
right? Which then gives us the Iron Age. So I've long believed that, but I'm just blown away by the idea that Titicaca is actually named after Babylonian phrases or Babylonian words.
yeah,
Do we
yeah,
see other? I mean, I've seen all the here's all these figurines that we see from around the world, in South America, right?
yeah.
I'm right there with you and all that. In fact, I'm of the opinion that people didn't migrate, like what we now call the American Indians, didn't migrate from north south, rather south and north.
Well, all
They
the
came
above. So
across the
everyone was just
Pacific.
crawling everywhere. So in any given
Yeah,
1,000 years, one single family could walk all over this planet. And to assume that, oh well, they didn't go 30 miles over here and 30 miles over here and 30
hmm
miles over here. If you just take 30 miles and add it up, and let's just say in a year that family members go 30 miles, which is nothing. That's just a few hour
yeah.
walk. So or 8, 10, 12 hour walk, whatever. But
Well,
to
it's about a
put
day's travel. Yeah,
yeah, so but to put that limitation on human beings is ridiculous because humans move. That's what they do. They just walk
yeah,
off. Whether or not they had a traumatic event, they just walk off or they whatever. But we crawl, man. We go everywhere. And
yeah.
so to try to lock us
hmm
into a single region for that period of time would be ridiculous. And using the
Well,
languages is
in
the big
water,
one.
yeah.
You
When
know.
water has never been an obstacle. I
No.
mean, mountains are more of an obstacle for people
Right.
than water has ever been.
Yeah, ice.
So it's much easier to think that people are just crossing using boats. I mean, we already know that a papyrus reed ship can cross from Egypt to South America, no
Right.
problem.
Yeah. And
I mean,
anything
there's
that floats.
absolutely
I mean, really.
exactly. I'm always amazed at people like, well, there's no way that the Polynesians made it to the Americas because their boats were too primitive. I'm like, these guys are navigating by how water feels.
Yeah.
These guys went everywhere, and we now have proven that there was trade between, uh, like the Hawaiian Islands and South America.
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
we know that exists now. They've proven that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've long believed that ancient ancient peoples were going all over the place. I've never believed this whole
Well,
there's the new world and the old world's like that doesn't float. But and again, ancient contact I'm all about. But I'm blown away by this idea the Babylonians were making it over here.
well, and when you get there's more evidence to that than there is, say, the Vikings in North America. There's just tons and tons all over Ecuador, all over down there. There's tons and tons and tons of stuff that is just direct Babylonian artifacts. I mean, if they were found over there, they'd be amazing because some of them are so nice. And just
Yeah,
because they're found in South America, they're either completely ignored or, of course, it's a fluke. Someone carried them over or whatever. When we know that, when you have the language, you have the culture, you have the even old medical traits and things like that
hmm
from the Egyptians and Babylonians are found throughout South America in the ancient times. Nothing
yeah,
as of recent. So it all got lost. Well, why did it get lost? Probably because those people weren't there anymore to either carry the
hmm
infrastructure, the industrial structure, or the methodology forward anymore to the people who weren't really aware of what they were doing. They were
yeah,
more witnesses and helping and cooperating. And but as
yeah.
far as languages go, you can, if it was just up to language itself, you would have to say that everyone's been here, because if, like in in Micmac, the North American natives called the Micmac, well, they
hmm
basically speak and write Egyptian. And that goes all the way down the line. So you have the Pima, and they're
hmm
the people from Libya, and then you have the Zuni. All these, their creation stories, what they call creation myth, but their creation stories are identical word for word. Their symbols are so similar that if you can read one, you can read the other. And so why anyone would disregard, and it's like that throughout all types of the Native American tribes. So we have direct historical links to the lineage. And then the interesting part is over there, so many of these cultures were completely wiped out and slaughtered, like the ones in northern Libya. We have their glyphs and we have their building. We don't know who those people were. We have nothing of them. But when you come to North America, you see the same glyphs, the same building techniques, the same interior plastering and color of their buildings. Everything's identical. But the culture no longer exists in Northern Africa to do the research on. So how do you? So they're not putting that together and saying, oh, well, here's where they went. So what you ended up with was parts of cultures that came to America survived out, and then that entire culture was wiped out back in the old world by conquest.
Well, exactly. It's one of those things where I think the reason most people don't look into it is because, from a mainstream academic ideas, it really upends a lot of assumptions that have been made about the ancient cultures,
right,
and ancient man, and it really throws a lot of those things into a people. But like I've known, that they found cocaine with Egyptian mummies. I knew that there were, I've long believed that the Hebrew made it over here because the Cherokee, right, and then you've got the Josh, the Judah stone. You've got even their name for the main, for the Great Spirit is to try and pronounce it would be terrible to hear me say it, but it's like it's so similar to the Hebrew version of Yahovah. You're like that is not a coincidence,
right?
So I am right there with you. I'm just floored at the idea that Babylonians had made it over here, or that there was some kind of contact.
Well, there was nowhere in the world that the Babylonians didn't claim to have been. So they claimed to have occupied every continent on the earth. So now, and of course, we're not looking at Antarctica, but who knows, right? Because we have maps from those days that show the coastline free of ice. So who knows where they were? But we have direct evidence of Babylonian, and all the way up through the Egyptian empires in Australia, all over North America, the Russian steppes. They were everywhere. And their influence went everywhere. And you're talking basically, you take an unindustrialized planet, there's a lot of population, but it's unindustrialized, and then you have cells where you install these cells. Like the Jesuit priests did the same thing. They were in deep in China in the 1400s with already all their access to all their historical records and everything, and they were building their own palaces for bringing back the old sciences. So the emperor would bring in Jesuit priests, give them their stuff. They would bring back the lost arts. So like lost arts of glass. And they did that. So that was a big deal. We still can't replicate what they were doing in the 1400s in China with glass. But it just shows that you have these super hyper advanced or hyper intelligent people. I wouldn't say hyper intelligent, just more knowledgeable people. And you, with your empire, you install cells all over the world, use those, cooperate with them. And it wasn't so much conquer everything as it was come in there and basically take it over in a soft conquer. But it leaves the local populations as almost witnesses to these greater academics and these greater institutions coming in and doing wonderful things. And sure, they're all a part of it, but do they or could they understand the full action of what's taking place and what's happening, like what the technology they're using and how did they get over here? What did they use? If we just go by the history, you could think that maybe Viracocha or one of those was some of these ancient Babylonian priest scholars or whatever, scientists. And when they talk about how they arrived by a ship. Well, but the ship shone in the sun like the scales of a fish. So it was reflective and had a rainbowish tinge to it. So we can imagine a big metallic silvery ship gleaming on the ocean. That's what they represent. And then when they say they left after they traversed the country, when they left by means of what they would call, it translates to automated flying machines. So flying machines that could fly by themselves. And that's how they left. So if we just go worldwide and just take the renditions verbatim and look at the timelines and look what everyone was doing, it tells you who everybody was, where they were going, and what was going on. It's just that this thing, it's not an assumption, it's not a mistake that the history we're taught is the way it is. It was actually planned that you're not going to get to hear about this, you're not going to get to hear about that.
Yeah. And
they're still just doing it. Even though we're at the point now where instead of a plastic bag full of water, you're looking at a net bag. It doesn't hold water anymore. But they still won't let go of the net bag and say, no, it's full of water. It's full of water. Feel it. It's wet. And it's like, sure, it's wet. It had water. So everything is leaking through right now. And they still just, it's like someone in denial for eons is they just not going to wake up and change that story regardless. And
well, I've got a couple of questions. What does this do to, things that we've talked about? One being the hammer that we talked about, Jason.
Oh, the London hammer.
Yeah, the London hammer. And what does the Celtics, these ships, these huge ships they were building, what does that do to all the arguments about, oh well, Noah couldn't build a ship big enough to do?
Well, see, that's part of the thing. So when we know that those people, the Celts up there, were some of the finest metallurgists on the earth, they didn't get to be that way just by doing trinkets and casting in soft stones and things. You don't get to be fine metallurgists doing that. You get to be fine metallurgists by revising industrial practice. So practices that are repeated on large scales where you can make small changes and revisions, and then you have time to see what those changes and revisions do. And so that had to be in place for eons amount of time. But of course, according to Rome, they were just a bunch of pagans, right, who running around in skins and whatnot, and sure, they had some jewelry. No, they were far more advanced than anyone in Rome ever thought of being, with most of the cultures that Rome took over. Like some had gas, lead pipes, and had natural gas plumb throughout all their homes. And the only way we know that now is we find the gas valves, and which are bronze. And a gas valve has to be made in a very exact way based on the molecule. That's how you keep a gas valve from leaking. That's why when you take one apart, they always have a certain taper. Well, that certain taper is what allows the valve to turn and still not let gas out. It's a mathematic formula. Well, they found these valves, even large valves, in cities that had been destroyed by Rome. And Rome was taking the lead piping and taking it back and using it for water because they didn't know. They had no idea what the gas even was. They did not know went through the systems. They didn't bother to ask. They just razed cities to the ground. So they assimilated the outcome of long periods of development, and they just assimilated the outcome and never really even understood what they were doing. So, but it shows those cultures all in that area were highly advanced. So advanced they didn't need conquest. They didn't need a lot of the things. There's always skirmishes, but they didn't have that Roman attitude where we're going to conquer your ass. Yeah. So they were able to achieve more, develop more, grow more. The world used to have schools all over it, like the libraries of Alexandria. These were places it didn't matter who your king was, what you were. You could go there in a neutral way, protected, and learn. And there were centers like that all over the planet. Yeah. So learning and getting along, they don't want us to know. They always tell us, oh, the whole world was fighting, everyone was at each other's throats. Man, we'd still be using sticks if we were like that.
We do that now, not then.
Right. And they didn't, for thousands of years, the earth got along. Other than little skirmishes, people pissing each other off, they got along, and they all worked together to understand, learn, and grow. And they really made huge achievements. Now they want to hide not just the achievement, they want to hide the fact that everything was gelling so naturally. Because now it's conquest and conflict. And this is how you could build a society. What is it? Society under war, society under peace. There's been great studies done in this. And our brilliant people like Brookings Institute and others couldn't figure out a way to have a society under peace, because what drives the growth of that society. So they use the war engine to develop and to accelerate through our growth. And so, but that's not necessary. There is other motivations humans do. It's just those in power don't recognize those. So you can imagine how the world would change and how our understanding of that world would change overnight if we viewed it from that point of view. Everybody getting along, forming co-ops, trading understandings around the world. Some developed very high technology. The multitude was just raw industry. So these people, it's like today, I can go into a neighborhood today, and most of the people in there, let's say, harvest crops for a living. And those people know how to do what they do, but they don't know much about anything else. And that's how the whole planet was. The majority just knew what it knew, and they didn't need the rest. And then there was centers of extreme high knowledge and high ability and high technical ability. And it's funny because if you just look at all the evidence verbatim, it just says that clearly anyway. So, and then, it seems like science now is defending itself more than it's doing anything else.
Science now has, to me, has the same arrogant attitude as the Brits did back when they were conquering everything, the Romans did when they were conquering everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, we think, we're so smart and everything else. We can't even replicate Greek fire.
Right. Yeah. Or there's a lot of things we can't replicate. I've got a gemstone that, yeah, I used to have a lap shop and I polished and lapped stones, and I've got a gemstone that surpasses any known ability to polish a stone. Period. In other words, like we use cesium oxide, 9 to 13 micron cesium oxide to polish with because it's finer than diamond. Well, and the oxide's still that durable. Well, I can still put it under one of our real high power microscopes. I can still see cuts and scratches in it that look like canyons, even at the finest polish. And we're talking way beyond optical standards. So optical's 300, and this goes up to around 15 on that scale. So, but I have a gemstone that no matter how high the magnification, you can see no flaws in the surface. None.
Oh, wow.
Zero. And so we cannot do that. I mean, maybe you could do it with plasma or something like that, but you're not going to do it with an abrasive or a grit, period. And so how they did it, who knows? But we've got a gemstone from the 1520s that was held by a Jesuit priest until he got his demise, and we got it. But somehow in South America, and we know this because the way it was cut and polished. So in South America, they were doing these type of polishes, but nobody knew how. And they were also doing things like, and the Europeans, they were more advanced than the Europeans in metallurgy and things. So their gold was all heavier than European gold, and the Europeans had no clue why. And after a while, they realized they were smelting platinum into the gold, and to increase its ductility and its usage, and the way they could use it for casting or doing whatever they were doing, and not have it come apart or not have it be too soft. But the point being is they knew how to alloy platinum into gold and did it all the time. Spain discovered that when they got there. So, the early conquistadors record, and the priests record, that their metallurgy was outstanding. It was literally superior to anything in Europe. But you don't hear modern archaeology, the history shows, or anybody else discuss any of these points, that they could nano polish materials and they could produce metals that Europe was completely unaware of. So where did they get where did they get all that information? So we don't see a civilization that rose with industrial means that would have developed those type of understandings. They wouldn't have got there yet, let's say. So you're talking, they're 500 years is what they had to work with. Well, you're talking 5,000 years worth of development. We still have not achieved some of this yet to this day. And so obviously there was the entire predecessor to the history they're showing is gone. I mean, it obviously exists because there it is. And so these are, that's, and when you say, why do we go after what we go after? What's our inspiration? Well, that's usually it. Sometimes it's monetary, great treasures, whatever. But basically, it's because if that treasure exists, it still throws history into the trash can, and it needs to be resolved and rewritten. And one of the things about like a massive treasure is if you recover, let's say, a chamber full of gold, and it has lots of records or lots of artifacts and things like that, you're going to get attention because of the chamber full of gold. Everybody's going to want to see that. So we've found through the years there's a huge separation. So lots of ancient records have been found that throw everything and answer a lot of questions. You'll never hear about them because the parties involved wanted gold. They don't want anyone to know. They don't want the attention. And then that's where we're exactly backwards. So we both want the value to grab the attention and to carry us further, but our whole point is to throw all the detail up in front of everybody. So
yeah. Well, and again, all this just goes back to the idea that the narrative that we've been fed as history is wrong, and it's not the actual history of this planet, because what the narrative that they want us to buy is not the true history, because it gives really the common man power. That's what this is about. It's they want the elite, they want sheep, they want cattle to be governed, not people who realize, hold on, this doesn't have to be the way things are going. We can fix this. We can change things.
Right.
But moving on just a bit, because I know Tex was really excited to talk about this, and I love it too. You were recently digging up an ancient crocodilian, correct?
Yeah, 250 to 280 million year old It's called a redondosaurus. There's actually a couple names for their species and subspecies. They have been changed in classification down over the year, but basically, yeah, just a giant ancient crocodile from the early Triassic. Little different than today's crocs. They had real big extended teeth in the front, and they had another larger set about mid-zone. So if you have a tooth an inch long, the front teeth would be 4 inches long. So they were that exaggerated. And then their nostrils were up between their eyes and elevated a little bit. Other than that, they were very much like a standard crocodile. Yeah.
Except a lot bigger.
Yeah, a lot bigger. Yeah.
You would say 40 feet long.
Well, yeah, some of the skulls are 6 feet. I mean, it's the biggest ones I've heard of. So and we have found them with 3-foot skull, and 3-foot skull would be, a 21-foot, animal. So. And that's what often in paleontology, they say 7 meters would be the largest they get or whatever. But we're aware of skulls that were recovered that were up to 6 feet. So
see, that's always been my question. Wow. When you're going back and you're digging in the fossil record, how do they know? Oh, well, this is the biggest something can get. How do they know?
Right. Well,
because,
see,
I mean, that's to me that's just arrogant.
It's extremely. So fossilization.
Just because you haven't found it doesn't mean it didn't get any bigger. It doesn't exist.
Right. Well, and the whole thing with fossilization is it's such a rare process, so that the only time it's ever been observed that I'm aware of was from Mount Pinatubo due to a volcanic mud flow, and it didn't take 1 million years. It took about 2 weeks. So a deer was caught in an 800-degree mud flow, and the scientists studied that, and it had cooked it in a day or two. That cooked it down to a material, the bone even, a material like a gel, and then it replaced with mineral and things, but it took 2 weeks, and they could chisel it out of the ground, and it was a fossil. So you're talking anytime there's extreme heat, high pressure, steam, mud flows, so you can get these things, and with the animals like what we find up there, they're not degraded. So something had to occur. Now, this is interesting. That's part of what makes a fossil. If anything had existed in the natural world, like normal goes on, I wouldn't say natural world. I would just say the normal events. You're not going to have a fossil. So when we look at paleontology and we say, look at all the animals that existed, look at all the ones we know of, they represent maybe 15% of the animals that were alive. We have no idea what was alive. That's how rare fossilization is. So they only represent 15% of the total. So then how many, when we have like this crocodilian, who's a tiny percentage of that, 1/10,000th or 1/50,000th of that. And then you say, oh, well, this is the biggest one, big as they could get. What's the likelihood that the biggest one got fossilized at all? It's not even likely that a member of the species got fossilized at all. See, right. So to even talk about arrogance, it goes way out there. It should be a complete, we have no idea. That's it. And then when you